Beliefs can be changed. Events that happen in our lives are history. They're just part of the challenge of growth of our life. They don't have to define us. We can look at those through different lenses, a different perception when we look for the gifts and blessings as we're changing the belief. And this is part of the soul integrative work that we do, as you know, Stephan, that's that protocol that THEO brought forward, and it spans our multidimensionality. It's not just for this lifetime, but others, as Marcus said, wherever a belief might have been created. And when we realize where that came from, we can rewrite that script.
Hello and welcome to Get Yourself Optimized. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, and it is my delight, my pleasure, my honor to have Sheila Gillette back with us and her amazing husband, Marcus Gillette. Over the past 25 years, Sheila and Marcus Gillette have empowered and educated thousands of people worldwide through intimate conversations with THEO. THEO is the 12 Archangels that Sheila has been channeling for decades now. She's been the direct voice medium for THEO, these 12 Archangels, since her near-death experience in 1969. In partnership with Marcus, Sheila has been able to share THEO's wisdom with an ever-widening community, sharing transformational messages that foster an enlightened state of consciousness. Before meeting, both Sheila and Marcus were on their own spiritual path. Sheila had already been channeling THEO for over 25 years. Marcus was happily immersed in his own spiritual journey, in part by THEO's teachings after reading Sheila's first book, The Fifth Dimension. After a divinely guided meeting and an instant connection in 1997, their impact on the world grew along with their love. We're going to hear much more about that love story and how it started in just a few minutes. The Gillettes published their first book together, The Soul Truth, A Guide to Inner Peace, and now their new book, The Art of Relationship, Discover the Magic of Unconditional Love, is out, and I actually have it in my hand right here. They also host a popular web TV series called Ask THEO Live. And I'm so grateful to have both of you here today. Thanks for joining us, Sheila and Marcus.
It's great to be with you, Stephan. It's nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Stephan. It's great to be here.
Yeah. And we got to know each other through Genius Network. I've had Joe Polish on my other podcast on Marketing Speak. I've met such amazing people through Genius Network, through Joe, and you guys are part of that, and you've changed my life. I'm very grateful for you guys. I'd love to start by, if you could share your how you met story, since this episode is really centered around the art of relationship and how to, as in your subtitle, discover the magic of unconditional love. How did you guys meet? It wasn't a chance meeting. It was divinely guided. Tell us about that, the magic.
Well, it started with me going to Santa Fe and meeting with a client who had just met Marcus maybe a month earlier. And she was in connection to another woman I knew in Santa Fe who had moved to Scottsdale. She said, "Oh, Donna's in Scottsdale. That's our mutual friend. And she'd love to see you if you ever come to Phoenix." And gave me Donna's contact information because we had lost contact because I had moved from Santa Fe back to Colorado. And she had moved, obviously, to Arizona. And this was in February. In March, I called Donna and said, "I'm coming to give a talk in April." And she said, "Oh, gosh, I would love to get together. Could we have a glass of wine when you get into town? There's a couple of people I want you to meet." And I said, "Yeah, that's great." That happens to me a lot when I go to a city and have people that I know. They introduce me to others just as they do you, Stephan, as you know. And so I got into town and I was staying with some very good friends, and they went with me to the Phoenician Resort to meet Donna and her two friends. So the three of us, my friends and myself, got to the resort. We went in the lobby and found Donna and her friend, Chip Lewis, who happened to be Marcus's best friend from college. So I was introduced to Chip. I had no idea that Marcus was the second person, and he was the last to arrive to this gathering. And as you know, having good intuitive experiences, I was having a wonderful conversation with the group, and I felt this energy come in the resort. And as I do when I feel different vibrational energies, I'm curious, what's that? Who is it? And I start looking around. Could be a human or it could be a discarnate being. I'm always curious who I'm getting the energy from. So I started looking around, didn't connect with anything, and resumed the conversation. And Marcus walked up to the table. And I felt that energy coming towards our table, and I looked up and literally took my breath away. Now, it wasn't just because he was an attractive man. It was so much bigger than that, Stephan. I literally could not breathe. And I knew from Donna's description that she had given him my book, The Fifth Dimension. And so I knew he knew more about me than I knew about him. So he walked up to the table and I said, okay, what's your story? Luckily, he's a good talker. He gave me a chance to take a few deep breaths before I had to say anything else. And so I'm going to share that with letting Marcus speak about that moment as well.
Well, it really started 2 years before that, Stephan, when this mutual friend of ours, Donna, gave me Sheila's first book. And I met Donna in the checkout line of the Safeway in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it was just a very brief, like you say hello to people, no big deal. And I said hi. She said hi. She went to her car. I went to mine. And when I got back in my car, I heard, go give her your business card. And I started arguing with that voice. I knew the voice. It was my higher self saying, go give her your business card. Resisted it, finally gave in, went and gave her my business card. I even said this to her word for word. I said, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm being guided somehow just to give you my card. And Stephan, that sounds really woo-woo to a lot of people.
Or a little creepy. Creeper alert.
Could have been a little creepy. Awful come on line in any event. And so I did. I gave her my card. She called a week later. My friend Chip, Sheila was mentioning, who was a good friend from college, was in town. The three of us got together for dinner and we became friends. And she gave me Sheila's first book. And that's how, The Fifth Dimension channels to a new reality. And that's how I got introduced to THEO, because I hadn't heard about THEO before that. And that was in 1995. Chip and Donna I introduced them. They ended up living together for 5 years. So there was all kinds of fun little synchronicities going on. And then I met Sheila, and I had, for me at that night when I was standing there and then sat down to hang out with the group, I don't know that I had anything other than a pure fandom going on. I was a real fan of Sheila's and THEO's, and I'd read The Fifth Dimension, and I'd studied The Fifth Dimension. It was rabbit-eared. It was a great book, and I just really happy to be there. And then we got to be friends, and she left town. We did before she left, I did a private session with THEO. I became a client. I was delighted to be able to, have these experiences with THEO one-on-one. And then we ended up going down to the Havasupai Indian Reservation about a month later. And there's some interesting kind of synchronicities that happened around this, because my friends and I had become friends with the medicine men of the Havasupai tribe halfway down the bottom of the Grand Canyon. People with the blue-green waters, and just gorgeous Shangri-La place on earth. I mean, just a high vibration place on earth. And we went down there for 5 days, and we had some pretty extraordinary experiences when we were there. And we're kind of giving you a Reader's Digest version of this story. But it's the one thing that happened once we got down there was we had a full-on collapse of time and space that occurred simultaneously as we were sitting outside a sweat lodge with two young Native American children that were with us, that had been with us the whole time, kind of with us, Sheila and I. And we had a full-on past life experience together where we were seeing and sensing and experiencing the precise same thing in that moment. And we started sharing with each other what we were seeing and how we were dressed, and the children in the same clothing that we were in and so forth. And it was clearly several hundreds of years prior. As we began sharing this with each other, we became very obviously aware that we'd been together in another lifetime in this place with these children, as a matter of fact. And there's a number of different things that happened in addition to that, but it was just kind of the extraordinary really became our new ordinary together. And that's why we're so enthusiastic about teaching and sharing Theo's teachings on the topic of relationships, because these kinds of experiences are becoming ordinary now. These extraordinary experiences that people are having in relationships that go beyond our five senses or our third dimensional reality. So we came out, and Sheila, I'll turn it over to you from that point, because you were pretty much the instigator of everything that happened following that.
So I'm going to regress a minute to my experience. I knew that something big was in this energy connection. And it was like, oh, we're supposed to do this thing together. And what if he doesn't get it? And I know maybe some of your listeners have had that experience in relationship. But then our relationship evolved, our friendship evolved. We went on the trip. The connection, as Marcus said, we had many multidimensional experiences. And when we got out, Marcus had invited a group of people to his home to have a THEO experience. And there might have been about 30 people, I think, there. And then after they left, after the event, we went outside on his patio, and we're just looking at this beautiful, serene yard with a waterfall and a little pond, and it was just idyllic. And we're sitting there, and Marcus says to me, well, what are we going to do on our second date? And I said, I don't date. And it was really true. I didn't date. I didn't have time. I was doing my work. I was traveling to do events. And I just was not interested in dating, really. And then he looked at me. He says, well, I guess we'll just have to get married then. And I was like, okay, we can do that. I don't think he intended to say those words. They just flew out his mouth. And Marcus, you can talk about your experience.
Stephan knows what you're talking about. Stephan channels information. And, things pop in and they pop out through your mouth, and you're like, where did that come from? And who was that speaking through me? And to be clear, though, too, just to digress for another minute, we did absolutely fall madly in love with each other while we were down in this Shangri-La for 5 days. Now, Stephan, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a first date being on a 5-day camping trip. For most couples, that's probably not a good idea, but it was exactly what we needed. And so we literally had fallen in love with each other, and it was just magical. And so from that moment on, there wasn't a single bit of doubt. When you actually have that no doubtedness about something, in spite of having no real clue where it came from, because I hadn't intended to say that at all, there's just such a deep sense of peace. And there was also a vibrational experience that we had where it almost felt like going into a different dimension. Like where I at one point, and it's hard to describe, but I actually walked into the kitchen and turned the light on to make sure that I was still in my physical body, if that makes any sense at all. I didn't have a sense of my physical body anymore, which was really weird.
Did you scare yourself so much with those words that you thought you had an out-of-body experience?
I don't know what happened, but man, it was amazing. And so that was really, at that point, and there were some other things that happened that we write about in the book, but there was some amazing things that transpired after that. Everything as it unfolded just perfectly aligned. Everything just fell into place. And that was pretty much, we met on April 10th. We got married April 11th the following year. 25, who knew, right? 25 years later, we're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this April. So it's been an amazing 25 years for sure.
Oh, congratulations. And I can relate to that soul recognition of knowing very quickly that you found your soulmate in this lifetime. So when Orion and I met, it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes max into meeting her that I knew she was my soulmate, because I was giving her a blessing. We were at a Tony Robbins event that had just finished, and last night there's this whole oneness meditation, and everybody gets a blessing. The blessing givers go around and touch people on the head. Give them a what's known as a diksha, and she didn't get touched. We met through a mutual friend who introduced us in the lobby after the event finished. And she had mentioned that she didn't get touched. I'm like, well, I just learned in India 2 months earlier how to do this. I'd be happy to give you a blessing. And so I did. And as you channel that energy of divine grace through you into the person that you're touching, the more you want it for the person, the more divine grace passes. And so I was praying for her like she was my soulmate. And so I knew. And that's why I got a ring and prepared to pop the question 9 days after we met. And she said no. She said not yet, even though she was in a hot air balloon, had nowhere to go. But yeah, she still said no.
Well, she said not yet.
Well, she didn't jump out either.
Stayed in the balloon. That's good.
That's always good.
Yeah, that's a great story. I love.
So I can relate to the soul recognition. It's a beautiful thing. And
so, Stephan, how long was it until she said yes?
9 months later, I reproposed, and she was getting a little antsy. She looked up the statistics of the second proposal happening, and it's pretty slim. I knew it was just a matter of time. I got a second ring. I was ready to propose to her in the summer, and then she was in a really cranky mood and sick, and so I'm like, okay, never mind. She didn't even know until well after that I was planning on proposing. That on that trip in Colorado, actually, we were, I think, in Breckenridge during the summer, and we took the gondola up, and it was super windy, and she was really cranky. Like, why are we going up here? It's like, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to propose up here at the top of that mountain. Not good timing.
Timing is everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, so thank you for sharing such a beautiful meeting and all the synchronicities and the magic of it. So it's clear that from what you're saying, you guys are soulmates across lifetimes. Do you have any sense for how many lifetimes you've had together?
Oh, gosh. Numbers? No. I would say maybe hundreds. Interestingly enough, when I started doing the work with THEO, I always in from the beginning knew I was to have a partner, a male partner. And up until I met Marcus, there was not that partner to share this work with. And so I had just decided, well, maybe I'm wrong. I know you have a lot of intuitions, and sometimes we think it's going to be an immediate thing that happens. And that's our human side going, instant gratification. Where is it? And when it doesn't come for a long period of time, I gave up. I just said, I must have been wrong. And, linear time, we get caught up in that linear time thing. And when I gave up and said, maybe it's not going to happen, and was okay with that, it's when we met. But I know we could not have met any time before then. Our lives, in fact, I was in Phoenix often, giving talks, working with individuals, and Marcus wasn't living that far from my best friend, who I always stayed with. And we never crossed paths. We never ran into each other at a restaurant or, like you might do, because even though it's a city, the different communities are smaller, as we all know when we live in certain sections of the city. We never crossed paths. And even with my work, we never crossed paths. So it's really clear that had we met before, we couldn't have met before. There were other opportunities that, those kinds of people call synchronicities, where you bump into somebody on the street. It had to be the way it happened, which was even better than I could have imagined.
You let go and you let God.
Yeah, I did. And amazing things happened. Like I met my soulmate.
What are your guys' understanding around soul contracts?
Well, what Theo says is that we come in with a blueprint, basically, is how they describe it. And not to usurp free will, of course, because we're co-creating this as we go along, but that there are agreements. One of the tenets of Theo's teachings, as you know, Stephan, is that there's no victims. We're all volunteers, and that every thing we perceive as a challenge in life is always for our highest good. What's in it for us? What's the gift or the blessing in every experience that we have? And that challenges are inevitable. Struggle is optional, of course. It's a choice. And so when we come in with a blueprint of learnings, Theo talks about the purpose for incarnating in human form is the learning of emotions. So we come in with a soul family, as Theo describes it, of which certainly Sheila and I are a part of the same soul family. And there's a different resonance with soul family. There's a different vibrational, magnetic thing that goes on. If you think about the connection that we had with you the very first time that we met, you don't have that with a lot of people, but when you do, it's just absolutely awesome. And so there are contracts, there are agreements. We talk about this in the book a little bit. And they do get fulfilled. And the soul creates the circumstances for the fulfillment of those agreements, but it's in a co-creative recipe, if you will, with the free will of us in these human bodies with our thinking minds to be able to make decisions, and the soul's guiding it perfectly. So wouldn't you say, Sheila, that there's no mistakes here? Nothing really random about what occurs in relationships at all, because there's such a divine guidance that's at play all the time.
Well, and Theo says groups incarnate together to support each other's growth. And we're talking about soulmates, and we can have several of them. Sometimes they could be our most challenging relationships as well. And that's part of the contract that you're talking about. Because we grow best in relationship. We have our highest highs and our lowest lows in relational experiences, I believe. And so we can track that. And after we have enough life experience, as you know, we can look over our lives and see how that's played out. How each thing we've done and each relationship we've had and we've grown from, hopefully, that's the purpose. And we continue on. And some, that old saying, reason, season, or a lifetime. Well, the type of soulmate you're speaking about, Stephan, is that lifetime or lifetimes in the sense of relationship. And that's what we've all come to know in that kind of connection. But, sometimes we get connected with a soulmate in relationship, in primary relationship, that contract gets completed. And it's okay. It's okay. But most of us, we don't do it very elegantly when we break the contract or break up with the contract completes, because the old way to do it was the blame game of creating an angst and anger instead of remembering the love in that relationship. And so what we talk about in the Art of Relationship book is honorable separation. That if you can remember the love, you don't have to create the blame game. Because those are all, we've all contributed to whatever challenges that we've had. We all contribute. One isn't the bad guy and one the good guy. We're contributing to that experience together. So, the paradigm of relationship now Theo talks about is preference, not needy, for not coming from a needing place. And need has been a big draw for centuries in relationships. And part of that is the attraction to someone to fill up the void, to heal our inward being. And so we intuitively connect to the drama, trauma, or pain in another, assuming that if we help heal them, they'll heal us. And that just doesn't work anymore, because we're responsible for our own evolution, our own consciousness shift, our own healing process. It's an inside out job. And that's what we talk about.
So a soulmate could be for, as you said, a reason for of clearing some sort of karmic debt, for example. It could be for a season. Let's say that somebody loses their spouse early on in their life, in their marriage, and they need somebody to step in and provide some stability for a period of time, but their lifetime soulmate is not that person. It's somebody later on. And then there's that lifetime soulmate, which some people are lucky or fortunate enough to meet in, let's say, high school and be with that person for 50, 60, 70 years. How would you define a soulmate, encapsulating all three of those types? Is it somebody that helps you to complete your mission, grow spiritually, provide the contrast, the tough love? Like, how do you define it?
Well, again, as I spoke, there are different contracts, if you would, that we have with our soul family. With Marcus and I, we live the new paradigm of relationship, that it's preferential. We want to be together. We enjoy that. We don't have a lot of drama or trauma. We do have differences of opinion. It's not to say that everything's just ease and grace all the time. It's ease and grace, but we do have independent ideas and conversation and dialogue, but we don't have the angst that many do from a soulmate who's there in the sense of challenge, to challenge us in ways that may be very, very uncomfortable. You wouldn't be together if you weren't supposed to be together. I think sometimes I made the wrong decision. No, you didn't. You made the right decision at the time that you made that decision to be together. And you'll make the right decision when it's complete. And we're living longer now. Humans used to die at 20 or 30 years old. And so a lot of people got in relationship early on and then they died. They lived out that span of that contract. Now we can have several contracts in a lifetime when we live to be 120 or 50.
Yeah, I want to dispel the notion of karma too, Stephan. THEO's not a big fan of karma. They think karma is an opportunity for growth as opposed to a debt to be repaid. For me personally, there's a lot of wisdom in that, because every time that someone gets into what they perceive to be some sort of a karmic situation relationally, there's always massive opportunities for growth for both parties or for everybody involved, right? Why do bad things happen to good people, for instance? Well, that's a hard question to answer, but we know part of that question is because of the learning that everybody who's involved in that situation receives from the experience of it, right? In our own ways and whatever ways we needed to learn from. And so I think that there is this notion of carryover from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that there's debts to be repaid, and THEO doesn't really espouse that. What they say is that it's just learning. It's just opportunities for growth. And that's part of the soul contracts that you were asking about earlier too.
Can you imagine us, the three of us, because we're friends? Can you imagine us before we got in these human earth suits, sitting up there, wherever up there is, and saying, I'll go if you go. I'll go if you go, and we'll do this dance together. That's the way I perceive us as souls agreeing to that group incarnation to support each other's growth. My youngest daughter has said that to me because I had my near death when she was born, and she almost didn't make it too. And she said, Mom, we were up there deciding that we would stay together. And she totally believes that, as I do. We made this agreement, and she works in our company. And so oftentimes we have a laugh about how, that just what I said, I'll go if you go, I'll stay if you stay, that kind of agreement. And that's what I think we do. it's hard to perceive, but I like that perception in my own life, actually.
You said, Marcus, about karma. My view on it, my understanding of it, it's not punishment. It's a way to really grok the consequences of our actions, and both positive and negative. So if we don't have time in between, we don't really understand the implications because we haven't had that space in order to do so. If we put our hand on a stove, we get instant feedback. A hot stove, our hand's burning. We pull it off. So there's no free will. It's just instinct. It's just a reaction. Whereas if you don't get the instant feedback, it takes time for what goes around to come around, both good and bad. Then we have that space in order to really contemplate our actions and our words. And also, because we have that time, we have the ability to return to God. In Hebrew, return is teshuvah. A lot of people translate teshuvah as repentance, but technically it's return. So you're returning to God, and having that space gives you the time to do so. I don't see karma as a horrible thing. I think there's a point where you can graduate to being above karma because you've learned all the lessons that you needed to, positive and negative, around your actions and the repercussions, the ripple effect. And then you're in a new kind of reality. That's my view.
I love this conversation, Stephan, because how we're describing it these days with Theo's teachings on remembrance is that we are, at our core, who we are is a vibration of unconditional love. That's who we are. We leave here, we go into the afterlife, however you want to describe our next multi-dimensional experience. We return to a vibration of unconditional love. Well, what if we can be that vibration of unconditional love walking around in human bodies? No worries for the future, no regrets of the past, no energetic blockages in our physical bodies, our ability to completely connect and manifest at will. What THEO refers to more or less as six-dimensional realities in physical form. And I believe that's exactly what Sheila and I believe that's exactly what's happening right now. But what's happening is when we forget who we are is when we're unkind or judgmental or reactive to life. It's just a forgetting. And we all do it, but we're doing it less and less and less. And so there's this immediate, and the cool thing is we have this ability to self-correct in a nanosecond, right? In a moment, we can self-correct. So when we ever feel ourselves out of that vibration, what THEO's teachings on soul integration, as you know, are about is the ability to remember all the time who we really are. Every thought, every belief, every action continues to raise our vibrational frequency to become this vibrational state of being. THEO talks about it not as an emotion or a feeling, but as a state of being, a waking state of awareness in the physical body. So I love your conversation because it's really about remembering, and ultimately it's beyond words what that ultimately that state of being actually feels like, what it actually is. We can talk about, words like ecstasy or bliss or enlightenment or wholeness or whatever you want to call it, but it's amazing and it's really hard to put into words, and we're getting more and more and longer glimpses of what the state of being really is all about. So I just love your conversation about that going home, because that's what you're talking about. That's who we are.
Yeah, and the remembering, when you talked about that, I got the flash of an image from a scene of the original Lion King movie, the cartoon one. Mustafa is up in the clouds, up in the sky. He's talking as a spirit to Simba, and he's telling Simba, "Remember who you are."
Yeah.
And that's a message for all of us.
We hear, I love this. We hear so many people in our community ask, and this is such a great question. THEO will say, if you could see yourselves as we see you, there would be no discontent, only joy, and only love. If you could see yourselves as we see you, as we know you to be. And so oftentimes we hear people in our mentoring program say, well, tell me again now, how is it that I can actually see myself and know myself as you see and know me? Because THEO holds us, as you know, Stephan, in our absolute highest light of potential. You know, they see us in the most magnificent expression that we can possibly be in this lifetime. And the answer is just that. It's to remember who you are, you know, and continue to work on whatever beliefs are to the contrary, that are untrue about yourself. And that's the other core tenet of this whole process, is that beliefs that you hold about yourself that are anything other than unloving are just simply not true. And if that's true, which it is, then let's work on identifying the core circumstance of where those beliefs came from, whether it's this lifetime or any other that we've experienced. And that is where the awareness comes.
These beliefs they're insidious, and they're not just about us. They're about everybody and everything. They're about supposed truths and facts and indisputable facts. Things like birth and death and disease and aging and crime and suffering, petulance, just darkness. But they're all part of the illusion. The only thing that's real here is love, unconditional love.
And what THEO says is that we chose to come here. We've won the lottery. We got a body. There's lots of souls that would like a body and to have a human experience. And that we're all unique. Though there's many similarities, they talk about we have a tone in our voice that's unique only to us, more unique than our fingerprint. And they call it our soul note. And that we are here to be significant individually, whatever that means in our own lives. But that imprint is here purposefully to express, I'm going to use the word passion, but I can correlate to that, our soul energy expressed. How are we going to express our creative energies, which come from our soul? And, you know, we tend to, through the beliefs of not being good enough, worthy, whatever those beliefs that are untrue, block ourselves from fully expressing that. So if we can change those beliefs can be changed. Events that happen in our lives are history. They're just part of the challenge of growth of our life. They don't have to define us. We can look at those through different lenses, a different perception, when we look for the gifts and blessings as we're changing the belief. And this is part of the soul integrative work that we do, as you know, Stephan, that's that protocol that THEO brought forward, and it spans our multidimensionality. It's not just for this lifetime, but others, as Marcus said, wherever a belief might have been created. And when we realize where that came from, we can rewrite that script. And then we can begin to see ourselves as THEO sees us, that magnificent, creative, divine being that's here purposefully to have this life. Life is the purpose.
Yeah. And we can share that experience with a soulmate. We can have multiple soulmates in a lifetime, if that's the soul contracts and the script that we co-wrote for our movie with God. And by the way, I love this definition of a soulmate from Edgar Cayce. Such an incredible clairvoyant and psychic from 100 years ago. His definition is this: a soulmate is an ongoing connection with another individual that the soul picks up again in various times and places over lifetimes. We are attracted to another person at a soul level, not because that person is our unique complement, but because by being with that individual, we are somehow provided with an impetus to become whole ourselves. Or another way to paraphrase that would be to become who we really are, to remember.
Well, you know what? If you're with the person, and I know you are, Stephan, as I am, that person makes you want to be your best self. And I think that's a good criteria. If you're around people, and it doesn't have to just be your partner, it can be friends, but to engage and be around people that you feel you are a better you. That's what I look for.
Yeah. And it may not be the way that you might think. One might think, because it's like, wow, this person is really challenging to be around. I feel all this animosity or this disconnection or whatever. I'm just being hypothetical. In that scenario, one might need to zoom out a bit further and just imagine this person incarnated with you to fulfill a soul contract with you to help you to grow and them as well. So that's a beautiful gift. And if that person is forging us in the crucible, it's not easy. It's not painless. They might be pushing our buttons quite a lot until we work on ourselves enough that we don't have any more buttons. Our buttons have been worked on and they don't exist anymore.
Dalai Lama calls it our sacred friends. That's how he refers to the Chinese government, as our sacred friends, right? And to your point, I just want to say one thing real quick, Sheila, just the lack of reactivity to anything happening externally. Everything happening externally. Well, it doesn't matter what's happening in the outer world, doesn't matter the chaos or uncertainty, doesn't even matter the chaos or the uncertainty happening in our intimate relationships. But when we find that soul-centered space that Sheila was talking about, that place within ourselves, where we become that vibration of unconditional love, none of that matters. We're there to support, we're there to love, we're there to love, we're there to love, but it's not something that affects our center at all, or our vibration.
Well, I love what Stephan said about zoom out, because Theo's talking about broaden your aperture. And that's just what you do when you zoom out and see a bigger picture. To your point about the challenge, that's where we grow best. And those relationships, if we're growing, change. But most importantly, we change. And we know in a moment, I'll tell you, in my experience, it's as clear as the light bulb being off or on when you have the moment of recognition that the contract's complete. It's just a solid state of no doubt. This is it. And until you have that moment, you're back and forth and questioning, and that's all part of the growth, isn't it? It's all part of the, am I done yet? No, because you haven't had that solid state of no doubtedness. But when it comes, you know it.
Yeah. The word that comes to my mind that that just really resonates for me, rather than completed, is fulfilled. The soul contract has been fulfilled.
Better word. I agree. Completed. That's a much better word. It's nice to be complete.
It's nice to be fulfilled.
And fulfilled. Yeah.
Yeah. I love having a positive view on every experience, knowing that it was for my highest and best good, even when I couldn't see it because I didn't have my aperture widened yet.
Exactly.
Well, that's all part of why we're here, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Is to get that. It's interesting how as we move into that knowing about ourselves, there's a greater ease and grace that happens in life. I know in my life, I've had those times where it was really hard and I didn't get that I was creating the hard from wherever my mindset was at the moment. But now looking back, I can see, oh my gosh, the law of attraction was working perfectly. From where I was, what I was thinking about, how I thought about myself, the words, my self-talk, all of that played into those challenges. And it's interesting in hindsight, you can see what led you to those lessons. And that's why we see people waking up after they're a little bit older. Now, that's not a blanket statement, but typically, I should say, what I've noticed over the years of doing this work, waves of people awakening. And usually it's I'm going to less, it used to be 40 on, but now I would say 30 or 35. People have enough life experience to begin questioning. This isn't going so well. I want to change it. What can I do? We start asking different questions of ourselves. And of course, there's much younger people that are awake, but in the sense of their spirituality. But for the most part, in a general consensus, I would say that that's true. And this evolution of consciousness that's happening is quite exciting, but it's more than that. It's confirmational and of what THEO has talked to me about over the decades I've worked with him. But I think it's great for our planet what's happening, even with the chaos that's happening. We have to have the chaos to make the changes that need to be changed.
Yeah, we are. We're very optimistic. But I think there's a couple of huge benefits to the experiences that we're talking about right now. And one is it makes us better teachers through the telling of our stories. Because people can relate to the stories and they can relate to the, you experience that too. And what happens is we develop a much heightened level of compassion and empathy and love even, through our own personal experiences. And then we can legitimately be sitting and sharing, I know how you feel. I've experienced that before. And there's just a humanity that develops through the experiences that many people feel very victimized by without, like you said, widening, the zooming out or widening the aperture to see, oh my God, there was really something in that for me that I can grow from and be a better person and be more spiritually connected and also be able to share more empathy and compassion for others.
Yeah, it's like if somebody keeps hearing you talk about, oh, I'm in this mastermind, like Genius Network, and it's I'm on this private jet or whatever, they can't relate to that. But if you're talking about, well, I used to get physically abused quite a lot in my childhood and beaten and with a belt and kicked in the shins with steel-toed shoes, etc. Then they're like, wow, like that's real. This person's real and relatable. I had a horrible childhood experience too. How did this person pull themselves out of the gutter to become so successful? And it's all about building that rapport, relatedness, and then sharing the teaching lessons rather than teaching from on high. Like, let me tell you about this great tip or technique I learned at my latest mastermind.
Yeah, right. That's the humanity we were talking about.
Exactly. It's the human connection. We all have experienced, I know I have, about being around someone who's come into that state of being. It doesn't equate to if they have a lot of money or they've created a multi-million-dollar business or any of that stuff at all. It's about being in their presence just makes you feel better. They don't have to say anything or do anything, but they have that solid state of unconditional love. They're just at peace on the inner. They got it. They've got that thing. And it's not about all those external things, like you said, the mastermind and the private jet and those are things that people may want for their experience in life, but it doesn't make that sense of being. But when you're around it, man, you just want to be Velcroed to that person because they just make you feel peaceful. I think that's the best part of all of this.
And they give you permission to be vulnerable. Vulnerable is contagious. Vulnerability is contagious, as is speaking authentically from your heart. You're just giving that person that you're talking about connection. You're giving that person permission to be who they really are, to be vulnerable, to open up their hearts as well. And it's just this beautiful exchange that very few people have the sense of self to allow themselves to be that vulnerable in interpersonal communication. And in our world, it seems to happen very quickly because there's, like Sheila said, there's just this sense of, I can trust you.
And you get your toughest love from your soulmate because they'll challenge you. you'll be vulnerable. You'll share something that you don't share in public, right? And you don't have your public face on with that person, and they're going to call you on your, you know what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're out of time, but it was such a gift to have you both here. Any last parting bit of wisdom, tip, or action item for our listener or viewer to take now?
Just embrace the opportunities that you get, all of them, because there are many gifts and blessings in everything you draw into your life. So look for those. Look for what you're going to receive from anything that's happening to you and through you. Marcus?
And find humor in everything, and find the humor in yourself. I asked Theo one time what they find funny about us, Stephan, and they said everything, particularly how seriously you take yourselves, right? So we're inviting everybody to just tap into that childlike awe, that wonder, and lead with that in your day, lead with that in your conversations, in your explorations and what you're curious about, and stay curious. That's another good one, probably, too. Stay curious.
And buy The Art of Relationship and read it.
And buy The Art of Relationship. Discover the magic of unconditional love. Absolutely.
For sure. It's chock full of good stuff.
And where do people find you guys online?
It'll be AskTheo.com is where everything is, AskTheo.com. And if you want to go to AskTheo.com/love, AskTheo.com/love, we got a gift for you, and you can purchase the book right there and get a really cool experience with Theo, an audio experience with Theo, guided experience.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much, both of you. And thank you, listener. Make it an amazing week. Spread some light. Be the light. And we'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.